What's up, Magical Misfits? Drew here, and today we're just going to continue on in the same vein we've been going, talking about trauma work, because obviously that is, where the vast majority of my attention is focused at this time. So I think it goes without saying, but obviously I am not a mental health care provider or professional in any sense at all. And I am just weeding through my own stuff on my own and pulling in outside resources as applicable. So this isn't necessarily advice. I'm just kind of sharing what I'm going through and talking out my own head noise and my own experiences. And while I'm not trying to give you a method to come to the same place, I am sharing with others from a place of I'm getting good things out of this, and there are things that are important. The messages, the healing, if you will, whether or not the method is one that everybody should use. What I'm getting out of it could be of benefit to many, I would think. It's certainly been beneficial to me, so that's why I'm sharing. So first, as far as the methods go, I have many ways that I come to the conclusion of what that should look like. Not the least of which is the yearly reading I do with Erika each year. So my 2022 reading, each month broken down. I will leave a link in the description. This is Erika Farmer Tarot, and she's wonderful. But, there's things in there. There'll be messages in there like you need to meditate this month or, whatever. There's lots of little nuggets in there, right? And then, of course, I have my own methods. One that's pretty significant and really easy and sort of black and white, if you will, is working with cards on my own. But I get messages and meditations. I come across things in a sort of synchronistic way. People will say things to me or around me that spark something that leads me somewhere. There's lots of ways that I get guidance about how to handle these situations or that I stumble into these methods. But right now, in particular, I feel very in sync with my higher guidance, with deity, and with my own intuition and the whole thing. So if something calls to me, even slightly, I'm going to look into it. I'm going to look at it and try it and see what happens. So some of the things that I'm doing, I don't know if one thing in particular, I don't know if it's doing anything, but I felt called to do it, so I'm going to continue to do it. We'll get into that. First, let's talk about the daily practice. So I have a daily practice I do. It entails stretching and meditation, a daily meditation that's only 7 minutes long, just to sort of have that daily practice. I have recently added in a shielding. I got some guidance that I needed to be doing stuff like that, so I added in a shielding each day. And then there's my devotional with Ost. For me, a lot has started to come up while stretching. And at first I didn't really know what was going on, but I've kind of figured that out through my weekly practice, because in my weekly practice, I have my Kundalini exercise where it's a breathing and visualization meditation, basically. I have started to do a vagus nerve reset once a week, and I do these somatic meditations. And I was doing extra chakra meditations as well, and I'm sure that that'll still be a thing, but right now I'm focused on the somatic meditations. The somatic meditation is something that's new for me. So I was looking into, as I've said, sort of repressed memories, and that kind of led me into trauma trapped or stored in the body. And that kind of led me into the vagus nerve and the somatic meditations. So the gist of it is that when we go through trauma, obviously it's not just mental and emotional. Physical things happen in the body, right? We have like the flight, fawn and freeze responses, that sort of thing, right? There are physiological things that happen. And our nervous system is really important in those situations. And so the vagus nerve reset and the somatic meditations are forms of working with the nervous system to release trauma stored in the body. And I stumbled onto, again, it was just this chain of events that led me there. As of yet, I've only been working with one particular video for the somatic meditations. And in this video, the woman who's leading it, the meditation, she gets you to sort of oscillate. You keep your eyes open, which I had never done a meditation like that before, other than like walking meditations or something like that. But like to sit down and actually meditate, I always close my eyes. But she sort of leads you through this process of oscillating your attention from things you feel in your body to things going on in the environment around you, whether that be sight or sound. And I realized that I do this unintentionally while I'm stretching. I have my eyes open and, I'll stretch and I'll feel what's happening in my body, and maybe I'll hear birds chirping outside or the dog eating or the dishwasher making a noise or, whatever it is. My eyes are drawn to a spot on the ceiling or a spot on my yoga mat or whatever. And so I was kind of doing this without realizing I was doing it unintentionally. And I think I mentioned this in the last video, maybe not, but last month when I would be stretching, just all kinds of stuff started coming up. My mind would wander and I would get into these streams of thought that would lead me into sort of revelations or epiphanies or whatnot. And I would have these emotional outbursts. They would either be crying or really angry, not yelling, but, angrily saying things or what have you. And so it became obvious to me that stretching was important for my trauma work, that the body is very important in my trauma work, but it also became obvious to me that there were things that I had trapped inside of me that I didn't really know, that I hadn't really addressed. Like, I have back problems. I consider it to be a disability. I'm not 100% sure what all the issues are. I've heard different things from different people, and it's just a headache, right? But while I knew I had like anger and frustration related to limitations that are caused by the back problem, I never really, this is something that's been a problem my entire life. The first time I acted up, I was 6. And then from the time I was 17 on, it was just a constant issue. And so it's just life, that you just get on with life, right? So I didn't really realize how angry and hurt I was that I have this problem until it just spontaneously erupted from me one day. And I was just like, oh, I didn't even realize that I felt that way. And a lot of things like this were happening. A lot of them were directed at people where I was like, whoa, I never said that to that person. I didn't even know I wanted to say that to that person. But I came to realize that there are a lot of things, and they may not all be super traumatic, but either way, there's a lot within me that needs to come out. And a way to purge it is through speaking it. And I don't have to, the long and short of it is I'm not the kind of person who typically is going to be mean and nasty to people. Yeah, that's probably in part because of my trauma and because of my upbringing, but it's also just not the person I want to be. I don't want to be the person who goes around hurting other people. That doesn't feel good to me. Not what I want. And so someone can be really nasty to me and really mean to me, and I'm typically not going to give it back because I just don't want to. I don't want to stoop to that level. I don't want to be on your level. Like, you're not a nice person and I don't want to be there with you. That's the way I feel about it, honestly. But then, of course, there's another part of me that's like, excuse me? Like, my husband calls it my shadow. Your shadow. He'll say things like, your shadow's hanging out. And yeah, it is shadow stuff. Like, my shadow typically comes out when I'm watching something, a movie or a television program, because they're not real people. So I can just unload on them and it doesn't matter. Obviously real people are playing the characters, but I'm aiming that shadow at the characters and like what their problems are. But I don't really do that in real life. But the thing is, I still have those thoughts and I still have those feelings. So like somebody does something that's hurtful or nasty to me and I don't do anything or say anything about it and I just keep moving on, that's still inside me and I need to get it out. That's one aspect of this. Again, things that should have been said to people, whether they're nasty or not, just truth. Just like, I had a conversation with my mother. I've had many, but you weren't there for me when I needed you. And like, that's not even me like trying to be nasty. It's just the truth. It's just a fact. I needed something from you that you did not provide. And I never said that to her. And I never said it out loud, but it was there and it came out. And so part of how I realized what was happening, and like I was working on my throat chakra as well. I had been guided that that's where I needed to be, in my throat chakra. So like all the pieces started coming together, and like I realized that there is a lot of things, and some of them are really small and stupid, but there are things within me that I've held within me and haven't even consciously acknowledged. Some of them I did, a lot of them I didn't, that need to come out. And so sometimes it happens when I'm in the shower. Sometimes it happens when I'm stretching. It just happens, and I just let it happen. I'm almost always alone. Sometimes my husband will be part of it. But I just let it out. If it comes up, it's there. I say it and get it out of me. And I found this to be tremendously helpful, to just give voice to things that have been buried. And again, a good many of them, the ones that come up spontaneously, a lot of times I don't even know that I didn't even know I needed to say the thing. So I also attribute it to the meditations and all the work that I'm doing, that I'm getting these spontaneous sort of healing episodes. Another realization that I had was, I talked about it, I was afraid that I had repressed memories. And I do. Like, I have chunks of time. I have like almost 2 years of my life are kind of missing. But I realized I had a realization about this, that it's not really that there's not this big oogie boogie moment, right? Like, I had this fear. I was like, gosh, the things I remember are so awful. I don't want to remember what I don't remember. That's scary. But I've come to realize that that's not what it is in my specific situation. In other people's situation, it may be that. But in my specific situation, it was just that there was this dynamic that came about. The dynamic in my family before and after this gap in time was that there was a good parent and a bad parent. And I had a safe space. And during this time, there was no, like, one parent was gone. The bad parent was gone. And so there was just one parent. And the truth is, I didn't have a good parent and a bad parent. I had two bad parents. It's hard it's hard to say that, because I love my mom to bits, but like, she wasn't the best mom. She really wasn't. And I no longer had the safe space. So I was with an abusive mother and abusive brother, and the abusive father was gone. And there was a lot of traumatic stuff happening, probably on a daily basis, that for me, it was just easier, I would assume, to block it all out, especially after it was over, because once he came back, the dynamic went back to normal, and there was a bad parent and a good parent again. And I needed that safe space. I needed to be able to look at her like she was the good parent at that age, because, I was 8, 6, 7, and 8, I was in grade school. I needed that. So that was a huge relief too, coming to the understanding that there aren't these huge, awful moments from the time period, because there are some awful moments from that time period that I do remember, but that it was just self-defense mechanism to just bury or throw away all the junk that happened during that time period, as much of it as I could, the daily grind of it all, just to be able to function as a normal human being, and to be able to still be part of my family dynamic in as healthy a way as humanly possible, and a way that it was as safe for me as humanly possible. So clearly there's been a lot of work with my mother. Another thing that, like, because the toxicity of the father was so prevalent and so overt, like, I've been dealing with that all along, but the stuff with the mother was much more sort of covert. And even though a lot of it was overt and it was obvious, I always just pushed it away, because again, that was my safe space, the safest space I had. So that's, I think, where a lot of my work is. A lot of the trauma that is stored in my body is in relationship to that relationship with my mother. And that's kind of where I'm at. There's still a lot of work to be done. I think I'll probably be doing it for the rest of my life. But as I said, right now I'm focused on my sort of nervous system and really working with getting trauma out of my body. And that is through the, like, I don't know what the vagus nerve reset is doing for me, if anything, but I'm going to continue to do it because I really felt drawn to it. And as I said, right now I'm in this groove and just sort of going with the flow and following the river, as it were. Everything just keeps falling into place and really making really good sense and helping me on every level. So I'm just going to continue. Like, as long as I feel called to do that, I'm going to do it. As long as I feel called to do whatever the thing is, I'm going to do it because it feels right and it feels good. But I mean, I guess the gist of it was, for me, this sort of nervous system work, but more importantly, the more obvious part for me is this giving voice to the things that don't have voice. So even in my daily life, if I go out and something happens and it's not a good situation, I want to give voice to it. This video is already long enough, but there's another piece that I haven't actually put into action yet. So we'll see what happens with it. But I saw a content creator on another platform whom is a mental health care provider and professional. And they were talking about the nervous system, and they were talking about how people without trauma and people with trauma respond in any given situation. And she drew a little diagram, but basically there were these two lines that were a border, and like you'd have a trigger of some sort, and there'd be this sort of flow of behavior. Like, you know, you might be up and be frustrated and irritated and agitated, and you may come way down and even get kind of depressed and sullen. And like it's this self-regulation that happens within the body as we go through these experiences. And for a person, and it may vary depending on the trauma, who knows, but like people with trauma, their boundaries are shorter, they're smaller, it's thinner than people without trauma. And so the normal person, you know, there would be this trigger and they would self-regulate and they wouldn't go outside of their boundaries. So other people might not even realize that they are self-regulating. Whereas the person with the trauma can have the same exact thing happen, but it goes outside of their boundaries. And so their response is exaggerated. So the first thing that came into my mind for me was technology. When technology starts to buzz me and like, I'm not getting it. It's making what it is it hits this nerve that I have of trauma around my intelligence level, really. I think is what is at the core. But like, I become very frustrated, and I am visibly frustrated. Anyone around me will know that I am frustrated. But but what is happening inside of me is the same. It's just that because of the trauma, I have my ability to cope under normal circumstances isn't as proficient, it doesn't work as well, right? And so something that should be very normal and I should easily be able to cope with pushes me out, and I'm in a heightened state of whatever. So like with technology, it's frustration, and I'm cussing, or I will even cry. Not being able to get technology to do what I wanted to do will frustrate me to the point of tears. And this is not like it. I always work it out, whether I figure it out myself through YouTube or Google or something, or my kid helps me, or my husband helps. Like, it always gets worked out. So I think what I'm going to do, and that's just one example, but I think what I'm going to do from now on is that I'm going to stop and take a breath when I get into this heightened sense of it is fight. It is like that fight or flight. It's my fight response. That's my go-to response is fight. And I become agitated and I'm ready to go. I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to ask myself, how important is this thing in the scope of my life? Is it worth me getting this, that worked up about, that upset about? How important is this thing? And that seems like, common sense or whatever, but and it is. But just that little piece of understanding that people who have had trauma can't self-regulate as easily as people who haven't. And so, it's not normal for me to behave that way. Well, it is normal for me to behave that way, actually. But I find it very empowering to know that this is why this is happening. And I can choose to employ methods that help me self-regulate better as a result. That's the way I look at it. So that's a piece I'm going to put into practice moving forward. I haven't had any situations, technology-wise or other, that have put me into the fight mode. And of course, I don't like being in that mode, and I don't want to be, and I hope I'm not. But the next time I feel myself going into that space, I'm going to have this conversation with myself and see what happens. Hopefully it can help me cope, and I can just, take a deep breath and understand logically what's happening and sort of regulate all of my systems, my mental, emotional, and physical being into a better state, and then not reach that full fight mode. Yeah. I guess that's the gist of where I am with all this right now. I don't know. Hopefully some of you can relate, or there's something in there that you found useful in some way. But yeah, until next time, much love and gratitude.